So, Charles, he can stand at the top and, stand at the lectern all day long and say he's against defunding the police. But the American people have a memory, and we've seen it tried in city after city, and we've heard those Democrats very publicly calling for it. And it's been a disaster. That plus the soft on crime DAs has led to real crime problems in many cities. So what do you make of it?
I think there's two things to say here. The first is it would be churlish not to applaud Biden for taking this position. The purpose of politics is to convince people that you're right and they're wrong. Now, Biden has never been a defund the police guy, but it should be seen as a victory for those who are against this idea that he felt the need to stand up there. This is something Jonah Goldberg always points out. What you actually want is for the other side to adopt all your ideas. Because then you don't have to fight very hard. And the fact that Joe Biden said this does signal a shift. And it is a good thing that he's not on board with this. So I would certainly give him that. The political problem for him, as you say, is that he's still taking a defensive action there. He felt the need to say it because his party, not all of them, but certainly the most vocal elements, have created this hostage. Bill Clinton did not say fund the police. George W. Bush did not say fund the police. Barack Obama did not say fund the police. Why? Because they had nothing to respond to. Certainly there have been criticisms of the police, some of which are warranted. But this movement is something of a weight around Biden's neck. And so although I applaud him for saying it, he probably didn't want to have to. This is not a good thing for him to have to respond to. And that it is still out there is going to hurt his party going forward, especially, I suspect, in the sort of moderate suburban seats that he's going to need in 2022 and if he runs for re-election in 2024.
Jeremy, it's defund the police is an explicit piece of the Black Lives Matter platform. It's on their website. They've made no mystery about it, and of so many Democrats, as we just played. And there was a bizarre tweet by Eli Mistal of The Nation in response to this. Quote, he writes, "We don't need to defund the police. We need to fund them." He's quoting Joe Biden, with resources and training. And then he responds, "What freaking bullocks? But it's what whites want to hear." Now, the truth is, it's not just whites who want to hear that. It's actually black voters, even more than white voters, who have pushed this reversal. And if you look back at the history of what they did in Minneapolis and what they did in Detroit and so on, all these other cities that fell victim to the defund the police pushers, it was black voters who were objecting the loudest. In Minneapolis, 3/4 of Minneapolis black voters were against defund the police. And in fact, what they said there was, well, what about just having a Department of Public Safety where we reimagine the police department? And they were like, not only no, but hell no. No, we don't want that. Blacks more than whites saw the same thing in Detroit. So while people will try to racialize this, the push to fund the police as opposed to defund them, the truth is the facts belie that claim.
Mm-hmm. It's not only untrue that that's what whites exclusively want to hear, and that blacks don't want to hear that. Neither do Hispanics. If you look at what happened in southern Texas in the 2020 congressional races, a lot of the backlash to the Democratic Party there was because of the heavy law enforcement presence. A lot of the people who live down there are in the Border Patrol, or they are in some type of law enforcement that they rely on for their family's survival. And they don't like to hear defund the police slogans, any more than people who live in high crime areas do. And I think that, I actually want to point out, Megyn, that while there are loud voices in the Democratic Party that, you played, the vast majority of Democratic voters are people who are liberal, and even the vast majority of the Democrats in Congress don't support this. The problem is they just haven't pushed back when the loudest voices call for defunding the police.
Well, and the second problem is that it's actually been happening. I mean, I lived in New York City. One of the final straws in our relationship between Manhattan and our family was when de Blasio said he was going to defund the police by $100 million. I was like, peace out, right? And so it's not just the rhetoric of people like Cori Bush or Rashida Tlaib. It's actually been happening in major blue cities.
Yeah, but voters have also rejected it. Like the overwhelmingly liberal Democratic voters in Minneapolis rejected, the Department of Public Safety proposal that you were talking about. And in New York City now, the new mayor, a former cop, has very wisely shifted away from that kind of talk. It's talking about how we need to have a better relationship with our police forces, and he didn't change in his proposed budget this year. Didn't touch police funding, which is basically a repudiation of what the people in the de Blasio era were calling for from the city council on up. So, yeah, I think there is a much bigger recognition now that Democrats need to learn how to respond when the ideas of a relative minority of people in their party have no constituency. I mean, there is no constituency for defund the police. It's a tiny fringe movement. So, but it gets outsized attention, and Democrats have struggled with how to deal with that. I think one of the things that we saw play out in the 2020 elections, and I get into this in my book, is the way that Democrats struggled to even say things that were complimentary about law enforcement. I talk about this race in Iowa where the Republicans started doing polling, asking people, okay, do you agree with the statement? Are cops mostly good people, but there are a few bad apples who need to be thrown out? Or do you believe that the policing in the United States is systemically broken and we need to start from scratch? And overwhelmingly, they agreed with the former, that there are a few bad apples, but that most cops are good people. But Democrats never figured out how to express that. And they're still struggling with how to do that.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.